would love to hear from you, your thoughts on where the biggest rocks are, right? Where the biggest challenges are as you see them.
Well, the biggest challenge is the lack of exposure to algebra. We realized that in 2004, 2005. So I served on a delegation that fought to change the graduation requirements of the state of Michigan because we realized that the only required course at the time was to graduate was civics, and that you had 40 years of people who had never seen algebra. If they were on the college preparatory track, which was about 20% of the students, they saw algebra. But if you were not on college preparatory track, you never saw algebra for your entire middle school or high school years. So when we say that people don't are not interested in STEM, we forget that that happened here in Michigan. And so really the first class that really was required to have algebra was the graduating class of 2011. And what we saw is a lot of students struggled. A lot of them dropped out because they didn't want to take the algebra. So, as Automation Works, we are a post secondary tech certification training. We recognize that, and we don't require algebra for people to come to us. We do test for applied algebra because what we notice is that if you haven't really weren't good at algebra, you are afraid of the abstract nature of mathematics. And if I could strip that and get you to do problem solving, because that's the only reason why we need the algebra is to teach people how to solve problems, then I can educate them for middle skill tech certification careers in tech, which is what we do. Our highest graduate is at 166,000. 30% of our graduates are above 80,000, and most of them do not have a degree. But they go through a very rigorous process with us for a year of soft skills, cultural adaptive skills, and of course, technical skills, just so that we can get them through the process of understanding at least of applied algebra, applied geometry, and then all of the numerical that comes with technology.
That's great. Ida, you were nodding as Nando was speaking. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, in 2015, I saw some data from Pew Research that says that 83% of Black teens play video games. But yet, I very rarely hear of an employer using video gaming as a skill. And people go, but why? I don't know, because people forget that video games were not created by Electronic Arts. They were actually created by the Department of Defense for the express purpose of training, because it's a skill. And so when you watch young people playing these sophisticated video games, you realize they have very strong problem solving skills because the games throws things at them that are unknown, and they're able to navigate and be able to resolve those things that are unknown without a textbook. Now, they may go out and get cheat codes, but notice they go get the cheat codes. They're not reading the book to play the game. They're just moving forward because they have the skills of being able to solve a problem. We use video gaming as a way to test whether someone has the ability to build an algorithm, because that's all technology is you're building step-by-step instructions to have the computer do something for you. I don't necessarily need you to be able to do algebra abstractly to do that, but I do need you to be able to solve a problem and think in steps. And so we created a coaching app that does that and how I select my learners, and we're dead on. The irony of it all is some of the students that we have brought on board who are doing very, very well were D&E students in high school because the high schools do very little hands-on content, whether it's algebra, whether it's statistics. They do very little case studies that relate to real life. And so young people get turned off by the time they get to seventh and eighth grade. And so what we realize is that there needs to be more real life content. And only that could come, those case studies and that content can only come from corporate America because we know what we want our young people to have and what skills we're looking for. So I just believe that video gaming with case studies really will change the trajectory of what comes out of K through 12 and what goes into post-secondary. First of all, to provide internships not just for people in college, but at any age bracket. There's nothing like hands-on experience or on-the-job training, and you don't always need to have an apprenticeship to do that. The last couple years, we've been experimenting with something called virtual internships. And when we first introduced it, we had a couple of companies. One that stood out the most was MasterCard. Because when we started having a conversation, it sounded crazy on the surface. Because what I asked them for was to give me a live case study that you would expect an entry level worker to be able to do in your firm. So they actually gave us a case study. They gave us on how they wanted the assignment done and then what the finished deliverable should be. And so our learners now submit those assignments directly to MasterCard beyond just us because they use it as a recruiting tool. And guess what? What we discovered, people are a little bit more talented than you think. The problem is a lot of times they don't even know what's expected of them. And so when a corporation gets that involved in the curriculum and then turns around can write a check, even if it's not a full job but a stipend, that does something to a young people's mindset. It changes what they look like, it changes what they do, it changes the way that the education looks. And so we noticed that with our learners, they got a lot more serious. They made more money because now they're able to handle a cybersecurity attack and then create a PowerPoint presentation to say this is what we did and show the analysis of how they were able to solve it. That's a whole different conversation than just talking about theory. So I think that you don't necessarily have to always have a full-fledged job, but you can provide a virtual internship with stipends, which is really easy to do because you do it on the assessment side anyway in HR. The point is now let's expand it so that it actually looks like a real assignment that someone would do at a company. And we would love to have lots of those because I don't necessarily need to have a company as a body. I do need someone to lead the case study and to be able to work it out the way that it looks like for that company, and then to associate a stipend to it. And that would right there would change the trajectory a lot because a lot of Black people don't go to college because they have to earn a living. They don't have the ability just to go and spend 4 years and not produce income for their families.
Very, very interesting. Ida, do you worry though that with the sophistication of the growth of the tech industry, I love the idea of the stipends and what you're doing with MasterCard. The question is, how should we think about the portion that should take advantage of programs like that versus the portion of Black residents who should be aiming to go into 4-year programs so they can get into, maybe it's a different level of tech jobs and so on, right?
Well, when you do tech certification, it kind of blends because even if you get a degree in this day and age, you still have to get tech certifications. Companies just want that. They want to know that you know what you're doing with Cisco equipment. They want to know you know what you're doing with AWS. So even with the degree, you have to get a certification. What we do is the opposite. They get the certification first. And once you get on the certification path, you are now a lifelong learner because you're not going to keep your job without continual certification. It just is what it is. But what we notice is that individuals who get the certification, particularly since a lot of the providers allow credits to be matriculated to four-year institutions, they on their own go back once they start making money. Because in order to keep their jobs or to grow, they have to. And so what we did is just change the trajectory. So instead of getting the degree first and getting the certification, you get the certification first, and now it puts you on the degree path. Because once you start making 80 to $100,000, you're going to do whatever's necessary to keep that and keep moving down that path. I'm going to jump in on that one right away. First of all, making investment capital available. I have to remind people Automation Workz in itself is a startup. We had our first class in 2020. And I got a rude awakening in 2022 when I decided I was going to go on start my fundraising process. So I got into an accelerator in Boston, which is the capital of the world. And to sit next to people at Harvard, MIT, who thought my company was valued, but when I'm in Detroit, there is no value. I almost left Detroit. I got an offer from Tulsa, $1 million to come to Tulsa. And boy, I almost left because raising capital in Michigan for a Black person is very, very tough. Now, we just kicked off our first seed round, and I have to be honest with you, not one serious investor in the state of Michigan. We've had people from California, we've had people from London, all up and down the eastern seacoast, but none in Michigan. But I'm in Michigan. Even so much so that as we were beginning this process, we get a call from Buffalo, New York, which is cold, which I'm not going there, that says, if you move to Buffalo, we'll give you $1 million in cash, but not in Michigan. So we have to really put our money where our mouth is. If you really want innovation to stay in Michigan, you're going to have to fund it. You're going to have to write a check. It's one thing to say, attaboy, you did a wonderful job. But at the end of the day, that doesn't pay payroll. It doesn't pay the expenses that it takes to run a startup. And right now, we are not seeing that investment capital going towards Black startups. I would like the corporate leaders to walk away that there's an easy fix to scale. To me, the scaling happens in the curriculum, whether it's K through 12, whether it's post-secondary, because oftentimes the curriculum for schools stays very static, but corporate America is turning over their strategy and what they're doing every 3 to 5 years. And the schools just are not keeping up. And we really need corporate leaders is helping us to devise the curriculum that you need in order to get the skills that you want. And that to me is an easier fix than coming to a classroom because it requires less time, but it scales across millions and millions of people quickly.